It's a great privilege for me to read the citation for Mr. Bruce Liang. Bruce is currently the CEO of Integrated Health Information Systems. For those of us in the public domain, we know this very fondly as IHIS, and the Chief Information Officer at the Ministry of Health Singapore. Holding these two positions, Bruce oversees the advancement of healthcare IT in Singapore, which includes IT funding, policy development, strategizing, planning, implementation, and the operations of the countrywide programs and capabilities. So as you can see, Bruce is a very busy man. He is also responsible for the delivery of health IT services to all the public healthcare institutions. Prior to joining MOH and IHIS, Bruce held various leadership roles in Accenture. He has extensive experience in complex and large-scale enterprise planning and business IT transformation programs for governments and large businesses across Asia. Bruce graduated from National University of Singapore, Department of Information Systems and Computer Science, and has been active in the development of the infocom industry in Singapore. He currently holds directorship on the board of Assurity Trusted Solutions Private Limited, and serves on the advisory board of the Aging Research Institute for Society and Education, as well as NUS School of Computing Industry Advisory Committee. Titled Secrets to a Smart Marriage, Bruce will share his perspectives on what the critical ingredients of a great health IT marriage are, and discuss examples where such marriages have worked well. He will also offer thoughts on what can be done by both parties to strengthen the marriage over time. So without further ado, let us welcome Bruce with a round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks, Cherhing, for the kind introduction. It was a very long introduction. Actually, the simpler version of that will be one throat to choke for anything on health tech in Singapore. Right. Thank you for staying back. I know a number of you look very tired. I was here early on for the past two presentations. And this is going to be a bit different from the previous session, which was on bioengineering. I thought that was a really deep topic, right, on bioengineering. And for me, personally, a very inspiring one. But that was more like classical music. It's really deep, complex. This is more like pop music, right? Technology, health tech in the healthcare space, right? Now, I'm not sure why Hong Tim asked me to talk about this topic, but I guess the reason is because IHIS is quite polygamous, right? We are married to all public healthcare institutions. We also married to some private sector GPs, private hospitals as well to support them in some projects and so on. So we are polygamous. And maybe it's also because we currently maintain about 800 technology systems, right, for the various institutions. We do about close to 1,000 projects and software releases per year, right? So the scale is there. Most of them work fairly well. Some don't work as well. Right? So it's a whole range of things that we have. So maybe from there we can try to distill some of the observation and lessons we've seen from those projects. Perhaps the first point is about why marriage and why technology. So this is what we call the marriage acclimatization curve, right? I think some of us may relate to this graph, So the elation is probably the wedding day and the honeymoon period, right? So before that, there could be a bit of anxiety whether you can cope with marriage. And then you get married, right? Honeymoon. Then doubts start to set in after a while, right? So when you see your spouse maybe mount the toilet paper roll in a different way from how you mount it, right? When you see clothes being thrown outside the laundry basket, when laundry basket is just beside it. So some of these questions will appear, right? And then some start to wonder, hey, what am I in the long run, right? The fear. And then they go through a disappointment phase. And question is whether they get up or they get out after that, right? And hopefully they get up and eventually get to a more realistic state. They adjust their expectations, they find their way together, and then they move forward in a much better way, right? So that's kind of like the marriage curve. And it's quite similar to what we call the technology hype cycle curve. You look at it, the graph is almost identical, right? So this curve is actually a classic. There are two sources that draws this curve in technology projects. One is the Gartner's technology hype cycle curve. The other name for this curve is actually the change implementation curve, right? And what we call it within implementations lingo this is called the valley of despair, right? So you go through the initial stage where, hey, there's a new idea here, right? Unfortunately, we inflate expectations. Sometimes it's due to the technology guys. Sometimes it's due to the tech industry who overinflate the idea and what they could do. Then once the rubber hits the road through implementation, you get into a disillusion stage. Almost every project will go through. In fact, all the projects I've been through for the last 23 years have all gone through this stage. The question is, what's the gap between how high is this thing, as how fast do we get out of this valley of despair? Right, so this is where methodologies and change management will help to close up the gap as soon as possible. But you will definitely go through this phase, which is why within hospitals, almost every major IT projects will go through a productivity loss for a period of time. The question is how long, right, is that stage and whether you survive that. Then you go through. So there are similarities between marriage and tech projects, right? And hence, I guess we can, which is why we want to ask ourselves, actually, how do we enable the enabler? The enabler in this case is technology. We always heard people say that tech is an enabler for business changes. So, but how do we actually enable the enabler? I think there are a few thoughts here, right? The first point is that we need to take a business integration approach. I mentioned to colleagues quite a few times that there is no such thing as an IT project. Okay, there are only business projects with IT enablement. Right? So if you start any project thinking that it's an IT project, then I think we're on the wrong path, right? So and recently I was also in Ministry of Health. I was just reviewing one project to talk about what's the business intelligence requirements, right, for MOH to monitor what's happening in the healthcare system. You know, so someone was suggesting, okay, this is roughly my questions I want to answer. I will delegate to my next 2 levels down, and the tech guys figure it out and show me the results 6 months later. So I told you, if you want to do that, you must as well don't do the project. So you need to ask the questions, not your next level, because you are the person in charge of this division to monitor what's happening, right? And you need to work with us to collaboratively develop the requirements and develop prototypes to get to what we want. It cannot be a case where we disappear for 6 months and come back with a product that will 100% meet our requirements. That's impossible. So if that's the case, we must just don't do project, right? So there's no such thing as an IT project. There's only a business project. And I think the way we want to do it is this, right? The starting point always has to be based on a certain strategy that we're trying to achieve. It could be a model of care transformation strategy relating to readmission prevention strategy, right? It could be a strategy relating to maybe post-discharge management that you want to implement, right? Then the questions we got to quickly ask ourselves, this is almost like the anatomy of a business, if you think about it, right? There's the strategy, right? And the key thing is how are your business configured? What are the key processes and workflows, right? That's configured. And who will do what in the process, right? And how is tech going to enable both the people and process to complete the work that meets the strategy's requirement? And importantly, what is the policy that supports that as well? So take, for example, if you do a video consultation service, telemed service, right, for patients out there, you figure out what is the objectives you want to get from a strategy standpoint, right? Have you got the right policy to enable the adoption of the telemed service as well? That has to be put in consideration. And have we actually think about who will provide a telemed service in the future? Is it still the same clinician, or maybe we can actually redistribute the work between the care team instead of the clinician always taking on the hit, right? And with that, will the process change and the site of services change? So I think whenever you try to do a project that is IT enabled, try to think about it using this concept here, right? This is what we call business integration. The next aspect is that the IT needs to be involved in the business, right? For them to actually add real value to the business. In public healthcare, fortunately, all our clusters have a board IT committee, which is good. Right? In the US, only about 30% of companies have what they call an IT committee in their board. But whereas in public health institutions, right, 100% of the clusters have an IT committee, which is really good. And I think there's a fair amount of board discussions on IT in the agenda. We looked through that in 2016. Right? 20% of the topics were relating to technology as well. Although I wish most of the topics were transformative in nature. Right? It's not there yet. Right? And I think within the healthcare institutions concept, I think the IT leaders, say the CIO, the CTOs, and so on, they should really have a seat together with the rest of the senior management team, right? In my previous life as a consultant with Accenture, I get really concerned when I find the CIOs reporting to, say, the CFO or the corporate services. Can you imagine the CIOs report to the CFO, right? What kind of projects they will do, right? It will be of a certain nature, right? It's either, to me, the best optimal model is either to the CEO or to a key business service leader, right, who is directly in driving the business. I think that will be a more logical reporting relationship. Until now, there's still quite a number of listed companies with CIOs reporting to the CFO. So some of them have fixed it by creating another role called Chief Digital Officer to compensate for that. But it doesn't have to work that way. Okay. Sometimes that structure is set up because they feel that the CIO cannot think strategically. It's more like a tech person, right? But I think the right way is to find a CIO that can think business and tech. That will be a more sustainable manner. The other aspects, and conversely, I think the business has to be plugged into IT as well, right? And we are very lucky in the context of healthcare. There's something called the clinical informatics or medical informatics. So that's kind of like the bridge, right, between the two. And I would also say that at least because health and tech, they are really getting close. They're really getting married in a very tight manner. And I would actually propose and suggest that for clinicians, right, try to develop what I call a pie-shaped competency, right? So if you look at it mathematically, pi, right, there's a longer leg, there's a shorter leg, right? So the longer leg is actually your deep expertise in your clinical experience, right? And I'll suggest the shorter leg, right, be IT. Let it be IT, let it be computational thinking, right? Because I think the future of healthcare, a lot will depend on how you use technology to do your work. So try to develop a pie-shaped competency, increase your IT quotient, increase computational thinking skills. And the other aspects about that we need to take note in terms of enabling IT, I think we need to have a mutual respect between the business and the tech portion, right? So, of course, healthcare has started much earlier, thousands of years ago, in medicine and so on. Technology probably only kind of kicked off in about the mid-1940s with the first computer, ENIAC, right, at that point of time. That was a really large computer, ENIAC. I studied that in schools before. It was like 50 tons, 18,000 square feet footprint, huge machine that was built in, but I think it was 1946, around that period of time. Although the technology has only have less than 100 years of history, obviously it's evolving very quickly, and I think we can be quite sure you'll be here for the next 1,000 years. I don't think we're ever going to revert back to the pen paper back stage again, right? So both are very wide and deep topics as well, and I think there's room for mutual respect whenever you do any projects together. I've actually observed in some of the projects that IHIS has done with some of the clinicians. Often I get a bit concerned when, say, the clinicians, it's actually fairly IT savvy, and a lot of clinicians are IT savvy. And some clinicians have even actually written simple codes before, simple apps and codes before, right? And because of the experience, right, they think how they get involved in the design of the technology system, design of the technical architecture, the software engineering aspects of things, and dictating what products they want, how it should be architected at the back. This is where I get really, really concerned, right? Because able to see a user interface, able to see the requirements is only one part. Because the technology behind that is multi-layer, right? It's one thing to be able to define requirements and what you want, but it's another thing to be able to design the system, right, for interoperability, for security, for resiliency, for maintainability, for performance, for scalability, right? And that's where the field of software engineering comes in. So we do need to recognize the deepness of the technology behind. And likewise, I constantly remind my IHIS colleagues, especially those who did not come from the healthcare background when they join IHIS, do not ever trivialize the medical healthcare requirements, especially those who come from banking sector and other sectors. Why can't we just do it this way, right? In med, I try to follow go for what rounds and follow, right? How the consult goes, and you understand why things cannot be done in the same way as well. So the IT guys should not trivialize the medical requirements, conversely. And this is a quote from my good colleague Cheng Wei about the critical roles of CMIOs, right, in a marriage. And I will just read on his behalf. I think it makes a lot of sense. CIOs and CMOS, firstly, one cannot dominate the other. I certainly cannot dominate Cheng Wei. I think he's probably bigger build than me, right? And together we need to behave like responsible parents and actually watch the entire household budget. And we never quarrel in front of anybody, actually, right? We keep our arguments out to ourselves, right? And we actually, this is very key, we need time for ourselves to actually determine the common goals and aspirations. It's a process that we need to get together and work together, right? I thought that's quite good words of wisdom from my colleague Cheng Wei. Now, so what are some of the marital problems in some of this marriage that we have seen? Actually, there are a lot. I will just pick out a few, right? One aspect of this is the concept of shadow IT, right? Maybe before I talk about shadowing, let me just talk about how technology kind of has evolved and how the power has shifted, right, between technology and the users, right? And you'll start to understand what I mean by shadow IT. So when we first started computers in the 50s and so on, right, it were largely mainframes, and later at the 78, it was mini computers and so on, right? Now, those computers are essentially, all for the user is just a dumb terminal, right? You can't install software, you can't do anything. It's just an emulation of what the back-end mainframe or computer is doing. Now, the implication of that is that the user can't do anything, right? Because everything is controlled at back-end. It's a total, the logic, processing logic, everything is totally fully back-end with the mainframe computer. And then when we start to introduce things like the PCs and the internet, right? Users start, I can actually start to write I can use some simple apps, software, I can install it, I can play around with it, I can start to keep track of patient information on my own local machine, right? I can start to record trend lab results locally on my machine as well, right? And so they do have a little bit more power, right, with the advent of computers and internet. Then laptops makes it even easier, more mobile, so they move around as well. And then in the last decade or so, that's where we have mobile computing devices and cloud computing, right, which brings democratization of software to a totally different level, right? Because, for example, there are software as a service providers like Salesforce.com, right? Essentially, I know some clinicians actually are thinking of actually storing their patient information in Salesforce.com because you can actually make that available to you very quickly at a very low price as well, right? So, as a result of all this, this trend about moving more computing power back to the user's hand, it's actually a good thing because it encourages innovation, adoption of technology, but it also creates a potential issue of shadow IT that's everywhere across the healthcare institutions, right? So as a result, the CIOs and the technology guys find it a challenge to actually try to integrate the solutions. They find it difficult to secure, right, all these footprints, right, the computers across the different landscape, because some are in the cloud, some are in the local machines, right? So there are resiliency concerns, there are security risk concerns, and there are actually integration challenges, right? And that has occasionally caused some tensions, right, between business and tech when things go wrong as well. So the business guy will say that because you can't support me on time, I decided to try this thing, right? The tech guy says, but that shouldn't compromise the rest of the other technology systems that we have. So that's one common problem. The other issue that has caused some tension and frustration between business and tech is we increasingly are moving to some unknown frontiers, right? And there may not be a agreed way on how to approach that. So considering that requirements, right, there's a whole range from something that's more definitive requirements to something that's less well-defined or across more user groups, so it's far from agreement, to technology which is quite standard to something that's exploratory. There's a whole range of projects we talk about over here, right? I think for simple projects, let's say we want to actually replicate, we want to open a polyclinic, right? You want to have almost identical systems and processes across. That to me is actually a fairly simple project from a technology standpoint, right? But if you want to change a new care model as you open up a polyclinic, okay, that may get into slightly more complicated because the requirements are a bit less well defined, right? And the way we actually approach the project has to be different. It can't be the same methodology that we talk about, right? To complex project, like for example, we try to consolidate EMR systems across the clusters. That is highly complex project, right? Because it's far from agreement, right? Although the tech side, from the standpoint, to a certain extent, they're fairly standard technology, but the alignment of stakeholder requirements makes it really, really complicated, right? And then, of course, we have the last range, which I'm trying to contain that to less than 1% of projects, where we totally just, greenfield, just explore totally new things, right, to explore. So because there are different thought requirements, and if one party moves faster than the other, so the tech guys may want to chong, right, to try to go this scale, right? The business guy may want to go here, right? So that's potentially, if you are not in sync together, you may have tension, a lot of tension between the business and tech people. So the key is on where is a project in this whole landscape here, and what's the best way to manage the kind of innovation and projects. I think that one is something that business and tech got to work together to figure it out. And just to highlight this, I think some of you may have seen this graphic here. It's actually from the internet. I've seen it. Initially, it was just 4 boxes. Now they evolved to 8 boxes. When I first started looking at this many years ago, about how things can go wrong, right? Has you all seen this graphics before, right? So the first thing is that between business and tech, a lot of issues are relating to actually communications and methods. So maybe how the business people may define requirements. They say, I want a swing, which I can step on it. Maybe that could be a requirement. But the project manager, the project leader could understood it, could hear the last part. Okay, we're going to step on it. So design a step, but you can't swing because the tree is at the back, right? Quite easy. It's communications issues, right? And how the analyst designed it, he actually figured, oh, you want to swing as well. Okay, got it. I will cut a hole here for you to swing to a certain extent, right? But the programmer could build it in a totally different way. The programmer thinks maybe you just want to sit down somewhere with a pad, right? So your butt is clean, right? But when it's for testing stage, it could be a totally different product at a point of time. It's just a noose. And if you have consultants, they understand the requirements very well, but they build up a sofa couch for you instead, right? There could be very little documentation on the ground, so maintainability could be a challenge, right? And when it was installed, it's the most basic installation for the first release go live, just a rope, right? Can't even sit on it, right? But the building is magnificent. How you build, right? The project, the charges, and so it goes up and down as if it's a roller coaster, right? Post support, right? And marketing will always position the highlight of the thing without describing the problems. But actually, potentially, this is what the user originally wanted. The user may not have. The user could have articulated this, but over time, may find that actually this is what I want, right? So they are just in this series of transition. You can see there are many different roles and where things will go wrong, and that's the problem with IT projects. Because unlike a construction project, you could see the development in a much more visible way. IT project, beneath the user interface, there's a lot of processing logic. You cannot see it until you go through certain proper testing, serious rigors in software engineering before you can actually elicit the problem out. So it's not that obvious, which is why methods, communications, and the people you use are very important to actually close these gaps here, and there could be a lot. So now we go back and look at some of the projects that didn't work quite well. You can relate back to this. Okay, now I know why. Because there are actually multiple roles, multiple different interpretations, right? Now, so what are some of the golden rules, in my opinion, for a smart marriage? I think the first thing is marriage is long-term, right? So be in terms of the projects we want to do, the products we want to do, you have to think long-term. And the relationship between you and the technology colleagues has to be long-term as well. Okay. When I was a consultant, when I went to certain clients, I remember they used to tell me and my IT department, we must be long-term. Me and you may not be long-term because you're a vendor, right? So we will give you what we need you to do, and you just got to do it. But I'll always preserve my relationship with my IT people, my IT colleagues. That's not exactly the way I want it to be. I think it has to be all around as a partnership, right, between biz and tech, vendors or not vendors. It has to be a long-term sustainable relationship. And so in terms of, so it's definitely not a fling, right? So the next day we still have to get together and continue our life together as colleagues, right? So we got to think long-term. And the way we like to think long-term, right, this has been my quote for the longest time until Minister Ong Yi Kang adapted it. So his quote was, think big, start small, act fast, right? But since 1995, right, the quote I've learned is think big, start small, and scale fast. And this sequence is important, right? I mean, whatever products or systems we want to do, it's good to really have a big picture. What is the big picture you want? Where you want to get it to be? What's the big picture you want? Think big first. But then once you figure that out, right? Let's get into it quickly, right? And we don't have to be too ambitious. Don't bite more than what we can chew at a point of time. You start the project quickly, right? And if it works, iteratively it works, you scale quickly, decisively, right? And the reason why we can scale is because we have got a big picture in mind, where we want to get to. So which is why the sequence is important. And in light of that, this was why we actually tried to develop some platforms at the national level. The products are by no means perfect, right? But it gets us a starting point, and it gives us the ability to scale, to learn and scale along the way. There was another product that's actually been used by quite a lot of institutions, including NHG as well, which is called a Common Care Case Management System. Right? The first release went out in less than 9 months. Very, very fast. This is actually a project for community to use. A lot of problems with the first releases, right? The user interface wasn't right, the access right settings wasn't right, and so on. But then it's a new product. No one really had the complete set of requirements before that. So we said, we just get it done first, then we learn, right? Then they iterated iterations after iterations, right? It's getting better, okay? And I think eventually we get to what everybody wants it to be. But you got to start somewhere, right? Platforms like Health Hub is the same thing as well. The Health Hub is an app that's used by population. They can retrieve their National Electronic Health Records information, announced by the minister this morning, right? They could track certain vitals as well. They can do a lot of healthy lifestyle activities with health points and so on, right? The first release went out, believe it or not, is an app for the population. It went out in less than 8 months, right? We had a picture of where we want to drive Health Hub to. We just said, okay, we cut this set up, we just get it out quickly in 9 months, then we learn, right? And we're prepared for criticism. So I was there to present the minister about Health Hub. Says there's some parts which may not work as well, but it's okay, we deal with that. So minister says, okay, he will announce the product, and he says we co-develop a thing along the way. So we took in a lot of feedbacks and we keep iterating the versions. That's the concept of think big, start small, and scale fast. And this is the NEHR. We have a big picture, and the big picture is actually just simply we want to digitize all settings in Singapore. We want to connect all to NEHR, and for NEHR we can pipe it to the Health Hub for the population to see the information, right? And once we have the collective information, we could analyze the information through our analytics platform. Right? And that information could be sent back as well to everyone to improve care and for the patients as well. So that is actually what we call the digitize, connect, and analyze strategy that we've been following. Okay, the next point, so that was the first point, is to think big, start small, and scale fast. The next point is actually just communicate, right? So in fact, I go to any projects, right, especially tough ones, right? Quite often I hear the problems, I just repeat these 3 words. In fact, repeat this 1 word 3 times. Right? Actually, a lot is down to communication problem. Remember the comics I show you is about communication issues and challenges, right? And this is why there's something called, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this methodology called Agile Development Methodology, right? Which is useful for certain type of projects where the requirements are not as well defined and where speed is essential, right? Some projects, like EMR projects, for example, EDs and so on, you cannot do an Agile style, right? You need to be certain that you'll work quite well when you go out. So those we follow a more traditional waterfall model. But some projects which is more innovative in nature, we do an Agile style, and essentially there are a few components. The first thing to realize for projects where requirements are not clear and speed is essential is that there is actually 3 elements. There's the business team, there's the product owner team, and development team. The concept is that the project is not a project, it's concept is actually a product. We're trying to build a product. So that could be a product to analyze maybe retinal eye images, right, in a certain way. It's a product. It's not a project because actually theoretically the project never ends, because you want to build an eventual product, right, and keep iteratively develop it, build it up over time, right? So there's a product team and there's a development team. So the concept is that you plan, you prioritize the requirements, you design, build, you showcase back to products and business team, right, and you roll it out, iteratively deploy it out, right? And each cycle, typically in the Agile methodology, is less than 3 months. Right? So traditional projects, you take a year to 2, probably usually 2 years to roll it out. But for Agile type projects where requirements are unclear, right, you spin off, each cycle is about 2 to 3 months, you roll out a release out there. Okay? So note that 3 rows, and as well as the speed of deployment. And why I say collaborative communication is key is typically for Agile development methodology, these 3 group of people, they meet almost every day. What do? Apart from actually communicating, talking about their requirements, They actually see the showcase almost every day, what you have built as well. Then they adjust the concept along accordingly, and they test it along the way as well. So that happens is a very dynamic basis. So if you want to try something that's innovative, right, never been done before, right, the communications is at the kind of intensity that I just talked about on almost daily basis. And the other thing is that as we actually do IT project, please take the opportunity to change for the better, just like a marriage come together, right? So no one is perfect. I think it's important. In fact, I do that all the time in my marriage, right? I quite often think, hey, these are my habits. I say, but actually this habit may not be the appropriate habit in the long run. You know, I got kids in the future. I don't want them to see me doing this and so on, right? So I change for the better over time, right? Likewise here, it's the same thing for tech projects, right? And the point I'm trying to illustrate here is please don't simply automate whatever you're doing. Try to change the workflow of what they're doing as well. I think that's quite essential, right? And I've shared some of this with colleagues before, right? Which is in anything you try to do with technology enablement, you look at the workflow, try to consider the 7 R's before you actually just automate the system, right? The first thing is rethink how would you operate again if you have to redo this from start again. This is how we practice, this is how we actually run the process for years. If you have to redo again, would you still do the same way, right? You may want to relocate some of the process. This is the concept of home care, community care, for example. That's where you can relocate certain things, right? It doesn't have to be done at a certain premise all the time. Could we reassign some of the work within the care team, right? Could we reassign some of the work to the caregivers? Could we reassign some of the work to the patients, right? Now, what sort of tools can you use apart from IT systems? Are there diagnostics tools you can provide to the community as well, right? So things can happen out there versus back in the clinic. Could we resequence in a certain way so that you can actually cut down some wastage, right, and detect certain problems earlier, right? Could we simply just cut down certain activities, like could be audit checks and so on, right? Is that really necessary? And could we adjust the thresholds, right, for alerts and so on to actually improve the whole process? So typically for important projects, right, I will ask my colleagues who says, can we work with the business to just run this through first before we automate? We go through the expensive process of automating the systems. So that's one framework that you could consider, right, in terms of when you do IT projects, IT-enabled projects. And again, quote a quote from Terence Tang, who is now part of NSG now. One is the head of the house, and the other is the neck that turns the head around, right? Now, the point I'm trying to say here is this, right? Okay, the brain could be the computer systems and so on, but the business have to actually turn the brain, the computer system in the right way, right, to align with the business. Perhaps the last point here is about joint ownership and shared responsibilities. Okay, now this is quite a heavy diagram, right? Just now earlier I covered what I call the agile methodology, where there's quick 2 to 3 month cycle. Now the more traditional way of systems development actually goes in this flow: requirements to functional specifications to design, you do the programming coding, then unit testing, integration testing, ST, performance test, UAT, deploy and maintain, right? So that's the usual the flow that we do for complex projects, right? Now, some projects, business executives, they walk away with the wrong opinion that once I define the requirements, right, I'm done, right? I will use the system, right, when the time comes, okay? That is actually a very dangerous approach to actually systems development, okay? In fact, once the requirements are well defined, right, the users are in the best position to prepare for UAT. They have to prepare the task script and the test plan for UAT, because based on what the requirements define, they have to map it to a certain test cases and a very comprehensive set of test cases, right? And then they should be thoroughly involved in leading the execution of the UAT. It cannot be a case whereby you define requirements, then the IT guys define the UAT test plan and they execute it. So that would be wrong, right? Because those are the guys who actually build the system, right? So that's a flawed shared responsibility model, right? So the best models I've worked in many projects is that the users prepare the test plan under the guidance of the tech guys in terms of the methods to prepare it. They have to prepare the expected results, actual result, the test cases, right? The test cycles they want to run through, right? And then they have to lead in the execution of the UAT. But throughout this process here, right, where the technical work is being done, right? Users have to be very involved in validating their solution and jointly manage the projects along the way. When I say joint manage, because even through this process here, typically issues that we see in projects will be scope issues, scope management issues, or tech guys can come and say, sorry, this cannot be done, right? Could you actually modify your requirements a little bit, right? Try to be understanding. If it's a packaged product, you may want to contain the amount of modification you want to do. So there will be a lot of this joint management that has to happen throughout this whole process as well. So just bear in mind, so imagine, let's say a project is 12 months, right? You've spent the first 3 months to do the business requirements. The users don't stop there. Just bear in mind that they have to go to the next stage to prepare and execute it. So it's continuous. Okay, while the tech guys are actually doing the next level details of designs and constructions. So in a nutshell, right, my view is that to actually keep a marriage long term, and I guess in a way we can take this to apply to our personal life as well, right? Which is, we think long term, we communicate, we take the opportunity to change for the better, and about figuring out our ownership and shared responsibility. And I just have 1 minute left, which is just about right. I'll probably leave with a quote from NSG Group CIO, Liang, who's actually here. He's actually deeply married to NSG, right? And I thought this is a really good quote, actually. So getting the best and most of a smart marriage is to challenge each other, right? I guess not quarrel, challenge, right? That's the part here. How processes and practices can be changed to exploit tech, and how tech can actually respond back to the challenge. Okay, so actually NSG is very lucky to have Liang as a CIO. So with that, I just finished my presentation. Thank you.